The rain had started softly, a gentle drizzle that made the streets shimmer under the city lights. People moved quickly, umbrellas held high, coats wrapped tightly, each lost in their own world. Among the crowd, she walked slowly, her shoes clicking softly on the wet pavement. She didn't mind the rain. Somehow, it made the world quieter, softer. It gave her a small sense of peace she rarely felt in the busy city. She had spent the day teaching, her mind still full of laughter from the children. The little arguments over pencils and the shy smiles exchanged across the classroom. But now, in the rain, the weight of the day began to settle gently on her shoulders. She noticed the colors of the city more clearly in the rain. The way neon lights reflected on the puddles, the smell of wet concrete mixed with coffee from the street corner cafe. She adjusted her bag, making sure the books inside didn't get soaked. That was when it happened. A sudden gust of wind, heavier than the drizzle, flipping her umbrella inside out. She stumbled slightly, trying to hold it steady, her hands cold and wet. And that's when she noticed him. He was holding an umbrella too, slightly too big for him, but somehow he managed to keep it steady against the wind. He was watching the umbrellas flip and twist around them, a small smile on his face, almost amused at the chaos. When their eyes met, it was just for a moment, but it felt longer, almost as if the world had slowed down. He stepped closer, raising his umbrella to cover both of them. "Here, you might need this," he said, his voice calm, friendly, and warm in a way that made her feel safe instantly. She looked at him, hesitating for a second. Something in his eyes made her pause in easy, unassuming kindness and a spark of curiosity, like he wanted to understand the world gently rather than rush through it. She nodded, accepting the small shelter he offered. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. Almost drowned by the rain, they walked together for a few steps, awkwardly, because neither knew if the other wanted to talk or stay in silence. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. There was something about sharing the umbrella, the way the rain made the street glisten, the smell of wet leaves and distant coffee shops, that made it feel natural. "What brings you out on a night like this?" he asked finally, a simple question, but it carried genuine interest. "Just finished work," she said. "Teaching. It keeps me busy." He nodded, seeming to understand more than she expected. "I know the feeling. Some days it feels like work just follows you home, doesn't it?" She laughed softly, the sound almost lost in the rain. "Exactly. Today was long but good. The kids were funny. They said some things that made me think, and some things that made me shake my head. You know how it is?" "I do," he said. "I used to think long days were just about stress, but I've realized it's the little moments that make the day memorable. A smile, a laugh, a story you didn't expect." She glanced at him, surprised at how easily he seemed to understand. Most people didn't notice the small things. They only saw results, deadlines, tasks. But he seemed different, like he noticed life in small, quiet ways. They reached the corner where their paths would split, but neither moved immediately. There was a pause, a hesitation, as if both were wondering if they should continue walking together or go their separate ways. "I hope I didn't bother you," he said softly. "Not at all," she replied. It's nice, actually." He smiled again, a little shy this time. "I'm glad. Maybe we could meet again? Coffee? Somewhere dry this time?" She felt her heart beat faster, a warmth spreading in her chest despite the cold rain. "I'd like that," she said. And just like that, a simple act of holding an umbrella together in the rain had opened a door neither of them expected. The next days were filled with messages, short conversations that felt surprisingly natural. They discovered small things about each other, the way she always tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, the way he hummed softly when he thought no one was listening. They laughed over small jokes, debated lightly over trivial things, and shared quiet stories about their lives, the kind of stories one rarely shares with strangers. But the connection was real, unforced, and honest. They decided to meet for coffee, a small, cozy cafe tucked away from the main streets, where the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee beans filled the air. It was there, in the soft hum of conversations and clinking cups, that their bond deepened. They didn't talk about work at first, or about the responsibilities waiting outside the cafe doors. Instead, they talked about dreams, books, favorite music, and the small moments that had shaped them. Hours passed unnoticed. The rain had stopped outside, but neither of them wanted to leave the warmth and comfort of each other's company. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of being understood without explanation, of being seen without judgment. He felt it too, a calm excitement, a rare feeling that someone's presence could make the world feel slightly brighter, slightly more gentle. Days turned into weeks, and each meeting built upon the last. They walked through parks, sharing sandwiches, laughing at the way pigeons seemed to chase them in playful mockery. They visited bookstores, lingering over pages, recommending novels, and sharing little stories of their own lives hidden between chapters. They discovered small habits about each other, the way she always noticed the colors of the sky, the way he paused to watch people, quietly imagining their lives. Friends began to notice the change. She found herself smiling more often, carrying a little extra light in her step. He seemed calmer, more present, as if the world's weight had softened with her in it. Neither spoke about the future yet. It was too soon. But both felt it, the quiet certainty that something rare and deep was beginning. It wasn't always perfect. Awkward silences happened, small misunderstandings occurred, and sometimes the pace of life pulled them in different directions. But each time, they returned to each other, talking openly, sharing thoughts, apologizing, forgiving. They were learning the first lesson of love. It wasn't about grand gestures, but about patience, empathy, and the willingness to be present fully for another person. And so what began as a chance meeting in the rain grew slowly, tenderly, into a connection neither of them had expected. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, real, and emotional. Like a small flame that refused to go out despite the winds around it. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The rain had washed the streets, but it had also washed away the barriers between two hearts. And as they continued their walks, conversations, and quiet moments together, the story of their love began, simple yet endless. A story built on ordinary days, filled with extraordinary emotions. The days after their first few meetings passed like quiet waves. She found herself thinking about him at the smallest moments, while walking to work, while making tea, while listening to the soft hum of the city. The thought of him made ordinary moments feel warmer, like a sunbeam sneaking through clouds. He, too, found his thoughts lingering on her laughter. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about something she loved, the slight tilt of her head when she was curious. There was a pull neither could explain, yet it felt natural. Like a rhythm their hearts were learning together, they began spending more time together. Carefully at first, discovering the balance between curiosity and comfort. Weekends became walks in parks, where they would sometimes sit on benches and watch people passing by, sharing quiet observations. She loved the way he noticed details, how a child's small victory on a swing made him smile, or how a stray dog cautiously approached people. It surprised her how he seemed to see life in a way she never had, noticing small joys hidden in the ordinary. One afternoon, the sunlight was soft and golden, filtering through the leaves of tall trees. They walked slowly, talking about books they had recently read. She was animated, explaining her favorite chapters. And he listened intently, nodding, sometimes laughing at her expressions, sometimes simply watching her with a smile. They stopped by a small fountain, the sound of water trickling between stone edges. "I like this place," she said quietly. "It feels calm, peaceful." He leaned on the edge of the fountain, glancing at her.
"It does.
"Kind of like the world pauses here for a moment." She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to wrap around him like a gentle blanket. "Exactly. Sometimes I feel like life is too fast, and I forget to notice the small things. But then moments like this remind me." He nodded. "I know. And sometimes, sharing those moments makes them even better. It's like someone else sees the same beauty, and it becomes bigger, more real." She looked at him, surprised at how easily he expressed what she often felt but rarely said aloud. There was honesty in his voice, simplicity in his words that made them feel profound. She realized slowly that she didn't need grand gestures or elaborate promises to feel a connection. It was enough that someone saw the world in the same way, that someone noticed, that someone cared. Their conversations grew deeper as time went on. They talked about family, dreams, fears, and the strange, small moments that had shaped their lives. She shared stories from her childhood, the quiet afternoons spent reading by a window, the laughter of siblings echoing in small rooms. He shared his own memories-long walks through empty streets at night, the way he had learned to find inspiration in quiet moments, the fear he sometimes carried about not living up to expectations. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes their differences showed. She preferred calm, predictable routines, while he loved spontaneity and small adventures. There were moments of frustration, misunderstandings over plans, small arguments about trivial things, but each time they talked openly. They learned the delicate balance of giving space while staying connected, understanding that love wasn't about being perfect, but about being willing to understand and accept each other. One evening, after a long day, they decided to cook together. Neither was particularly skilled, but it didn't matter. They laughed over spilled ingredients, tasted dishes that weren't perfect, and teased each other gently. She accidentally added too much salt, and he joked that they could call it adventure soup. He burned a small portion of the vegetables, and she laughed until tears formed at the corners of her eyes. By the end of the evening, the kitchen was a mess. But they were full not just with food, but with a quiet joy that came from simply being together. They often found themselves walking late at night, long after the city's lights had dimmed, sharing soft stories and dreams. She discovered he had a small habit of humming softly when he was deep in thought, a sound she grew to recognize and secretly love. He noticed her careful way of observing life, the small sketches she sometimes made in her notebook, capturing moments most people overlooked. Each discovered detail built a mosaic of understanding and affection, an intimacy that felt natural, unforced, and deeply human. Friends began noticing the change in her. She seemed lighter, more present, as if her joy had been quietly amplified by something new. Her colleagues commented on the subtle brightness in her voice, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about even ordinary things. He noticed changes in himself too, the calm steadiness that came from having someone to share thoughts with. The quiet motivation to do small things better, not for anyone else, but because he wanted to make her smile. Their weekends began to hold small traditions. Some mornings, they would meet at a small bakery for warm pastries and fresh coffee. They would sit by the window, watching the city wake up slowly. She loved the smell of baked bread mixing with the cool morning air, and he loved seeing her take small bites, savoring them, her expressions animated and genuine. It was a ritual that didn't need words, just presence, shared moments, and laughter occasionally. They explored art galleries and museums, walking slowly through halls filled with paintings and sculptures. She would describe what a painting made her feel, and he would share what he saw in a sculpture. Each perspective different, yet strangely harmonious. They discovered not only art, but a deeper understanding of each other, how each interpreted the world, how each found meaning in shapes, colors, and stories. One rainy afternoon, much like the day they first met, they found themselves under an awning, watching the drops slide down the glass. She shivered slightly, and he offered his coat without a word, slipping it over her shoulders. She looked at him, her heart warm, and he smiled. A quiet smile that spoke volumes. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought a rainy day could feel this." "Good," she laughed softly. "It's the company, not the rain." He nodded, and for a moment they simply stood there, side by side, letting the rain drum softly above them. No words were needed. The comfort of presence was enough. As weeks turned into months, their bonds strengthened in countless small ways. She learned to notice the way he paused to listen, how he remembered tiny details from their conversations. He noticed the way she always carried a notebook, the way she would scribble small thoughts or sketches even in the middle of a cafe. Each gesture, each habit became a thread weaving them closer together. Their love was quiet but steady. It wasn't about dramatic declarations or grand promises. It was about showing up for each other, noticing the little things, sharing the ordinary moments that somehow became extraordinary when experienced together. A shared cup of tea, a laugh over a simple joke, a hand held in silence. These were the moments that built the foundation of something lasting. They faced small challenges too. Days when schedules clashed, when fatigue or stress made them irritable, when the weight of life outside their world crept in. But even in these moments, they found ways to reconnect. A text, a small note, a comforting gesture. Each acted as a reminder that they were not alone, that someone understood, cared, was willing to walk alongside them. By the time the first flowers of spring began to bloom, their relationship had grown deeper, richer, and more resilient. They had learned the language of shared glances, unspoken words, and quiet support. They had discovered the joy of simply being present with another human being, experiencing life in its ordinary and extraordinary moments together. And so, their love continued to blossom, not in the rush of dramatic events, but in the slow, steady unfolding of trust, understanding, and genuine affection. Each day was a page in their story, filled with laughter, small adventures, and the kind of connection that made life feel lighter, brighter, and infinitely more meaningful. They knew there would be challenges ahead, times when patience and understanding would be tested. But for now, they reveled in the simple joy of companionship, the thrill of shared discovery, and the quiet beauty of growing closer, moment by moment, in a love that was already proving itself to be real, tender, and enduring. Life, as it often does, introduced a new challenge when he received an unexpected opportunity to work in another city. It was a position he had dreamed of for years, one that could change the course of his career. At first, he was excited, imagining the projects, the experiences, and the growth this opportunity promised. But as the days passed, he realized that excitement came with a shadow being away from her. She, too, noticed the shift in their routine. Late-night calls replaced long walks. Short messages replaced spontaneous meetings. And the physical closeness that had become a comforting part of their relationship was replaced by the distance of technology. The first few days felt almost normal, as if life had adjusted to this temporary change. They texted each morning and night, sharing small updates, jokes, and thoughts. But soon, the gaps began to feel wider. She would wait by her phone, noticing every delay in his replies, every long pause that made her heart tighten slightly. The city around her felt different, emptier somehow, as though the spaces they had shared now held echoes of absence. She tried to distract herself: books, walks, small gatherings with friends, but a part of her mind always wandered to him, to whether he had eaten properly, if he was tired, if he missed her as much as she missed him. He, on his end, felt the weight of distance too. The excitement of new responsibilities was tempered by the ache of not being able to share even small moments with her. Coffee breaks, a walk by the river, the quiet evenings they had grown used to suddenly. They were memories he carried with him, memories that made him smile and ache simultaneously. He tried to call her during breaks, but work was demanding, and each call often ended abruptly, leaving both of them frustrated and longing. Small misunderstandings began to creep in. A message sent late, a tone misread, a busy schedule left unexplained. All of it began to sow tiny seeds of doubt. She would read into his short replies, imagining worries or frustrations she could not see. He would notice her delayed responses and wonder if she was upset or if the distance was changing her feelings. Both wanted to trust, but the human mind has a way of filling silences with imagined fears. One evening, after a particularly long day, he called her. The connection was choppy, the background noise of the city loud, but he wanted to hear her voice. "I miss you," he said simply, the words carrying more weight than either expected. "I miss you too." She replied, a tremor in her voice that betrayed her calm exterior. "It's hard, you know. Not having you around." He nodded, though she couldn't see it. "I know. I think about you all the time." Every little thing reminds me of you. Sometimes it's comforting, and sometimes it makes me ache. Silence hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. They didn't need to fill it with empty words. The distance had created a new form of intimacy, one that relied on honesty and vulnerability. And yet, even honesty couldn't always bridge the gap. Weeks passed. Both of them had to learn a difficult truth. Love across distance was not easy. The daily routines that once felt simple now required effort. Planning calls, coordinating schedules, making time for each other, despite exhaustion, it was a constant negotiation. And despite all effort, there were nights when loneliness seeped in, when tears came quietly, when a single message or lack thereof could unravel hours of emotional stability. She confided in a friend one evening, her voice small and uncertain. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I care about him so much, but sometimes I feel so alone. I worry that the distance is changing things, that maybe he won't feel the same way after a while." Her friend listened patiently. "Distance doesn't make love weaker," they said gently. "It tests it. It shows you what's strong enough to survive and what isn't. And if he's the right person, it'll only make your bond stronger. But it's okay to feel unsure, to feel lonely. That doesn't make your love any less real." Her words stayed with her, and she tried to find strength in them. She learned to focus on small joys, writing him letters that she knew he would read later, leaving little notes in their shared chat, sending photos of things that reminded her of him. It was not the same as being together, but it was a way of keeping the connection alive. He, too, found small ways to maintain the bond. He would send her pictures of the city skyline, snapshots of places he thought she would like, and little notes that carried his thoughts and feelings. Some days, it felt like a thread barely holding them together, but they both held on tightly, refusing to let the distance undo what they had built. Even amid the challenges, moments of closeness remained. A long call on a quiet night, a surprise visit when schedules allowed, a shared memory that sparked laughter. They reminded each other why the effort mattered. Those moments were fleeting but precious, fragile yet resilient. Like glass that had been tested and survived, they also learned to trust each other in new ways. Arguments that might have seemed dramatic in person became conversations over text or phone, requiring patience, clarity, and restraint. They discovered that understanding each other's perspective mattered more than winning a disagreement. They realized that love was not just a feeling. It was an action, a choice to care, to wait, to forgive, and to hope. Despite the difficulties, their emotional bond grew stronger. Absence made them more aware of the depth of their feelings. She began to appreciate not just his presence, but the little things he did, the way he remembered details from conversations, the care he showed in small gestures, the thoughtfulness in his words. He realized that her patience, her understanding, and her quiet strength were as much a part of her love as her laughter or her smile. One rainy night, reminiscent of the day they first met, he called her from his small apartment in the new city. The rain tapped softly against the window pane, and the city lights reflected off the wet streets. "I wish you were here," he said, voice low, carrying both longing and affection. "I wish I were too," she replied. "But we'll get through this, won't we?" He smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "We will. It's not easy, but it's worth it. You're worth it." And in that moment, the ache of distance softened, replaced by a quiet certainty. They were learning the hardest lesson of love, that true connection could survive distance, trials and uncertainty, but only if nurtured with patience, trust, and unwavering care. The weeks stretched into months, each filled with challenges and small victories. They celebrated tiny milestones a week without misunderstanding, a surprise message, a shared laugh over a memory. Each small success reinforced their bond, reminding them that love was not about perfection, but about commitment, understanding, and resilience in those quiet long-distance days. They grew individually and as a pair. She learned to find joy in solitude, to focus on her passions, and to trust in the strength of their connection. He discovered the importance of balancing ambition with care, of showing love even when separated, and of listening with patience and empathy. Through it all, the emotional thread connecting them never broke. They learned to cherish not only the moments they shared, but also the longing itself, the silent proof of love that persisted even when apart. And as the months continued, both realized the distance had tested their bond, but it had also made it richer, deeper, and more enduring than they could have imagined. The challenges were not over, and the future remained uncertain, but for now, they held on to each other. Even if only through words, images, and the invisible thread of shared emotion. And in that fragile, human, deeply emotional connection, they found a quiet strength, a reminder that love, when real, can survive almost anything. Time passed. In the months of distance, challenges, and longing had left their mark on both of them. Yet, instead of weakening their bond, those months had quietly taught them lessons about patience, trust, and understanding. When he finally returned to the city, the air felt different, not because the city had changed, but because they had both grown. There was a sense of anticipation mixed with nervousness, a gentle tension that comes when two people reunite after enduring the trials of life apart. The first meeting was simple, yet it carried the weight of everything they had felt and learned during their time apart. She waited at their favorite cafe, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, heart beating faster than she had expected. The door opened and he walked in, slightly tired from travel, but with the same warmth in his eyes that she had remembered. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence saying more than words could. Then, as naturally as breathing, they smiled, and it felt as though months of distance dissolved in that simple gesture. They spent the first hours walking slowly through familiar streets, talking softly. The conversation was careful at first, each word chosen with thought, yet it flowed easily. They shared their experiences, the struggles they had faced, the loneliness, the small victories, and the moments that had reminded them of each other. She realized how much she had missed his presence, not just in a romantic sense, but in the way he made ordinary moments feel meaningful. He felt the same about Hertha, where her laughter could lift his spirits, the way her observations could make him see the world differently. Reconnecting was not instantaneous. There were moments of awkwardness, of small missteps, when they had to relearn the rhythm of being together in person. A smile was held too long, a joke misunderstood, a silence that felt heavier than it should. But instead of letting those moments grow into arguments or resentment, they chose to talk, to listen, and to forgive. They discovered that reconciliation was not about erasing the past, but about understanding it and moving forward with empathy. One evening, they sat together in a quiet park, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. She rested her head on his shoulder and he held her hand gently. "I forgot how much I needed this," she said softly. "I know," he replied, his voice low, careful. "I missed everything about you, your smile, your patience, even your little stubborn habits." She laughed lightly, a sound full of relief and joy. "I missed you too. And I think we've learned something important, haven't we?" He nodded, squeezing her hand. "Yes. That love isn't just about being together when it's easy. It's about staying connected when it's hard, about choosing each other even when life tries to pull us apart." From that day on, they began rebuilding their routine together, but with a deeper understanding. Small habits that once went unnoticed now felt significant. The way he made her tea, just the way she liked it. The way she would leave notes in his bag reminding him of little things they had talked about. They were no longer just habits. They were acts of care, gestures that reflected attention, thoughtfulness, and love. They also discovered a new appreciation for time spent apart. The months of longing had taught them patience, the value of personal growth, and the importance of self-reflection. She found joy in her passions, and he learned to balance ambition with emotional presence. Their reconnection was not a return to the old, but the beginning of a stronger, wiser version of their relationship. Small adventures became a way to celebrate their reunion. They would explore neighborhoods they had never noticed before, visit little cafes tucked away in narrow streets, or simply walk along the riverside, talking about life, dreams, and the future. Every shared laugh, every quiet conversation felt like a stitch weaving them closer together. It wasn't just about romantic gestures. It was about discovering life side by side, building a partnership grounded in understanding and mutual respect. There were also moments of reflection. They spoke about the difficulties they had faced, the doubts that had crept in, and the fears that had made distance seem heavier. These conversations were not easy. They required honesty, vulnerability, and courage. But each discussion brought them closer. They learned to see each other's perspectives, to understand motivations and emotions, and to respond with empathy rather than frustration. One rainy afternoon, reminiscent of their first meeting, they found themselves caught under a sudden downpour. Instead of rushing for cover, they laughed. Running through the wet streets together, letting the rain soak their clothes and wash away the remnants of doubt and worry. She splashed water playfully at him and he chased her, both laughing freely, forgetting everything except the joy of being together. In that simple moment, they realized that life, with all its challenges, could still hold moments of pure happiness. Their reconciliation also brought them closer to a sense of shared responsibility. They began discussing their goals, not as separate individuals, but as partners. They spoke about careers, personal growth, travel, and even small routines that would help them stay connected, no matter what life threw at them. The conversations were grounded in practicality but infused with emotion. Balance, they had learned, was essential for enduring love. Family and friends noticed the difference too. There was a calm confidence in her, a quiet joy in him. Neither seemed the same as before. They were wiser, more patient, and more appreciative of the simple joys of companionship. It was clear that the challenges had shaped them, not weakened them, and that their bond had grown more resilient and meaningful. Even ordinary moments became extraordinary. A quiet dinner at home, cooking together and sharing small stories, felt more intimate than any grand event. Walking home after work, sharing thoughts about the day, or simply sitting side by side in silence, all of it carried the weight of shared understanding and emotional connection. They realized that love was not about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was about presence, attention, and the willingness to invest in each other every single day. As spring fully arrived, the city seemed to mirror their renewed bond. Flowers bloomed, streets buzzed with life, and the air carried a sense of freshness and possibility. They walked through parks, hand in hand, noticing small details, the smell of flowers, the laughter of children, the warmth of sunlight filtering through leaves. Each moment was savored, not rushed. Because they had learned to value the ordinary as extraordinary, they also continued learning from each other. She discovered the quiet courage it took for him to balance career and emotions, the thoughtfulness in his gestures, and the way he considered her perspective in decisions both small and large. He in turn learned from her patience, her empathy, and her ability to find joy and beauty even in mundane moments. Their growth was intertwined, a reflection of the bond they had nurtured through challenges and distance. Evenings were often spent reflecting together. They would sit by the window, talking softly about dreams, fears, and the lessons life had taught them. Sometimes they shared comfortable silence, knowing that words were not always necessary. Other times they would laugh over memories, teasing each other gently or dream aloud about the future, imagining adventures they might take, experiences they hoped to share, and the life they wanted to build together. Through reconciliation, they discovered the profound truth of human connection, that love is not just an emotion, but an ongoing choice, a series of actions, and a commitment to understanding, patience, and presence. They realized that challenges were not obstacles to avoid, but opportunities to grow, learn, and deepen their bond. By the end of they were no longer simply two individuals who had met by chance. They were a partnership, grounded in trust, respect, and the quiet knowledge that they had endured trials together and emerged stronger. Their love was no longer fragile or uncertain. It was resilient, tested by distance and difficulty, and enriched by understanding and growth. And as they continued to walk through the city streets, side by side, They felt a quiet certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together, with patience, empathy, and unwavering care. The love that had begun with a chance encounter had grown into something enduring, capable of weathering storms, celebrating joys, and finding meaning in every small, shared moment. Time moved on gently, almost unnoticed. As they settled into a rhythm of life together, the city continued its constant hum around them, people rushing to and fro, lights flickering in shops and offices, seasons changing as they always had. But for them, life had taken on a new texture, one made of small, meaningful moments, shared laughter, and quiet understanding. They had learned that love was not just about excitement or passionate, was about presence, consistency, and the countless tiny choices made every day to nurture a bond. Mornings often began with simple routines that had become quietly sacred. She would wake slightly earlier than him, preparing a cup of tea, the aroma filling the kitchen. He would join her with sleepy smiles, sometimes bringing small pastries he had picked up on his morning walk. They spoke little at first, letting the comfort of shared space speak for itself. Even these ordinary minutes carried warmth, a gentle reassurance that they were together and that their lives were intertwined in the most natural way. Weekends were full of soft adventures. They explored small neighborhoods, parks, and hidden cafes tucked away from the crowded streets. Sometimes they would wander aimlessly, discovering murals on walls, old bookshops, or a quiet bench by a fountain where they could sit and watch the world go by. Every discovery was shared joy, and every quiet moment felt profound because they experienced it together. The city itself became a witness to their love, holding echoes of their laughter and quiet conversations in corners and streets they often visited. She learned to notice the subtle gestures he made without thinking, how he would adjust a blanket when they sat outside, how he remembered the way she liked her tea, the way he always seemed to anticipate small needs before she even spoke them aloud. He noticed her attentiveness, too, the careful way she listened, the way she observed life around them, the gentle kindness she showed not only to him, but to everyone she met. These small actions, repeated countless times, became the foundation of a love that was enduring, quietly powerful, and deeply human. Evenings often became a time for reflection and togetherness. They would sit by the window, soft light illuminating the room, and share their thoughts about the day. Sometimes the conversation was long, filled with laughter and teasing. Other times it was quiet, a simple exchange of glances, a shared silence that spoke volumes. They had learned that love didn't always need words. Presence, attention, and understanding were enough to keep the heart connected. Even when life itself was busy or chaotic, challenges still arose, of course. Life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Work pressures, unexpected events, and the occasional miscommunication reminded them that love required effort, patience, and a willingness to forgive. But by now, they had learned the importance of perspective. Small frustrations no longer grew into larger conflicts, and each difficulty became an opportunity to strengthen their connection rather than weaken it. They listened, they empathized, and they worked together to ensure that the foundation they had built remained solid. Holidays and celebrations became meaningful rituals. They didn't need extravagant trips or grand gestures. Simple moments, a walk along the river under autumn leaves, a quiet dinner at home with candles, sharing a warm dessert on a chilly winter night were enough to fill their hearts with joy. They learned to find happiness not in spectacle, but in shared experience, in the intimacy of knowing another person so deeply and feeling secure in their presence. Friends and family often commented on the calm joy between them. There was a lightness in her step, a quiet strength in him, a sense of balance and ease that came from having someone who truly understood, supported, and cared. Their bond became an example, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, tested, and resilient. People saw a love that wasn't fleeting or superficial. It was patient, insistent, and deeply rooted in understanding. They also cultivated shared dreams. Plans were discussed carefully, not as a source of pressure, but as a way to grow together. They spoke about travel, learning new skills, even the simple goals of maintaining a life filled with warmth, laughter, and mutual support. Each plan was approached with thoughtfulness, ensuring that the needs and desires of both were considered. This balance, they realized, was key to sustaining love over the long term. Even small disagreements became opportunities for connection rather than division. They learned to pause, listen, and approach each situation with empathy. Over time, arguments that might have once seemed significant became brief moments of discussion, quickly resolved with mutual understanding. In these instances, they discovered that love was not about avoiding conflict, but about responding with care, respect, and patience. The seasons continued to change, and with each change they noticed the subtle beauty in life. Spring brought flowers, summer warm evenings, autumn golden leaves, and winter soft, quiet nights. They found joy in observing these cycles together, often taking walks to watch the first blooms, or sitting by a fireplace while rain or snow fell softly outside. These shared experiences, though ordinary to some, became extraordinary because of the intimacy and attention they brought to them. They also celebrated the ordinary in everyday life. Cooking together, doing errands side by side, sharing meals, or simply sitting in the same room absorbed in their own activities, became a small testament to their connection. The love they shared was not always loud or dramatic. It was gentle, steady, and consistently present. Growing stronger in the quiet constancy of shared life, there were moments when they reflected on the journey they had taken the chance meeting. The first tentative conversations, the months of distance and longing, the challenges that tested their patience. Looking back, they realized how much they had grown, both individually and as a pair. The experiences that had once seemed difficult now felt like essential lessons that had strengthened their hearts and deepened their bond. As the years passed, they discovered a profound truth about love. It was not found only in grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but in the consistency of care, the attention to small details, the shared moments of joy and challenge. They understood that true love endured not because it was effortless, but because it was chosen, nurtured, and respected day after day. Even in quiet solitude, they felt connected. She would sometimes sit by the window, thinking of a small conversation they had shared, or noticing a detail he had pointed out, and feel a warmth spreading in her chest. He would pause during his work, recalling a laugh, a gentle word, or a look exchanged. It would give him strength and calm. Their connection became a constant, a quiet source of comfort and inspiration in a busy, unpredictable world. They also learned to find joy in the imperfections of life. Messy kitchens, spilled drinks, missed appointments, or minor misunderstandings were no longer sources of frustration, but reminders that life was real and shared. Laughter often followed mistakes, and understanding always outweighed irritation. It was in these imperfect moments that they realized the true depth of love. It was about accepting each other fully, celebrating small victories, and holding space for growth and change. Evenings often ended in quiet reflection. They would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing thoughts and memories. She would lean against him, feeling the steady warmth of his presence, and he would hold her hand, noticing the subtle rise and fall of her breathing. In these moments, words were unnecessary. The connection was profound, emotional, and completely human. It was a love that didn't need embellishment, because it was lived in every small action and thought in their journey. They discovered that love could be both extraordinary and ordinary at the same time. The extraordinary came from the depth of understanding, the resilience in the face of challenges, and the way their hearts had grown together. The ordinary came from shared meals, quiet mornings, walks in the park, the subtle gestures that filled everyday life with meaning. It was a balance that made their bond timeless, real, and endlessly beautiful. They also realized that love was not static. It evolved, deepened, and changed over time. What had begun as a spark grew into connection, then into commitment, and finally into enduring partnership. Each stage had its own beauty, its own lessons, and its own emotions, all of which contributed to the richness of their journey. By the end of they had built a life that was steady, emotionally rich, and profoundly human. Their love was not about perfection, fame, or recognition. It was about presence, care, understanding, and the countless small moments that together formed the tapestry of a shared life. They had learned that one love, chosen and nurtured with patience and empathy, could inspire endless emotions, sustain through challenges, and create a bond that endured through all of life's unpredictability. And so, they continued to walk through the city. Side by side, their hearts aligned, their spirits intertwined. Knowing that the journey of love was ongoing, every day offered new moments, new joys, new opportunities to care, understand, and grow together. Their story, which had begun in a chance encounter, had become a testament to the quiet, steady, enduring power of human connection, a love story filled with endless emotions, small victories, shared laughter, and the kind of intimacy that lasts a lifetime. Life continued to unfold around them in quiet, predictable ways. Yet each day carried a richness that made even the most ordinary moments feel extraordinary. They had learned that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic events. It was about presence, care, and the small choices made consistently over time. The days now were filled with routines that had become rituals of intimacy. Moments that nurtured their bond without demanding perfection. Mornings often began with the soft hum of sunlight filtering through the windows. She would make tea, carefully stirring it while he read quietly nearby. The newspaper or a book, sometimes glancing up to smile at her for no reason at all. They had settled into a rhythm where silence was as comfortable as conversation, and the sound of a shared space had become a source of calm. Even the smallest gestures, pouring a second cup of tea, adjusting a blanket, tucking a strand of hair behind an ear, were imbued with meaning, because they carried thoughtfulness and attention. They still made time for adventures, both big and small. Weekends were for exploring the city or surrounding nature, sometimes with no destination at all. Wandering through quiet streets, discovering a new bakery, or sitting by a river watching the water flow, they approached these moments with a sense of presence and shared curiosity. Each exploration, no matter how mundane it seemed, became a memory because they experienced it together. She noticed the way he observed life around them, pausing to watch children play, a stray dog wander by, or the changing colors of the sky. He noticed her ability to see beauty in small, fleeting moments, capturing it sometimes in sketches or notes. Their conversations had deepened over time. They no longer spoke only of dreams and desires, but also of fears, regrets, and moments of vulnerability. They shared insecurities without fear of judgment, knowing that honesty strengthened the trust between them. She had learned to recognize his silent contemplations, as the quiet moments when he needed space, and he had learned to respond to her subtle cues of discomfort or uncertainty. In this way, their relationship became a partnership built on awareness, empathy, and emotional presence. Evenings often held their own magic. Sometimes they cooked together, creating simple meals filled with laughter, playful mistakes, and shared pride over little successes. Other times, they simply sat together, sipping tea or hot chocolate, letting the warmth of each other's presence fill the room. They had come to understand that intimacy was not measured by dramatic moments, but by consistency, the quiet patience and attention that formed the backbone of enduring love. They also found joy in supporting each other's growth. She encouraged his passions, celebrated his achievements, and offered gentle reminders when stress weighed him down. He, in turn, nurtured her interests, provided reassurance, and helped her see possibilities beyond immediate challenges. Their support for one another was not performative or conditional. It was rooted in care, respect, a deep understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. There were still challenges, of course. Life never stopped presenting obstacles, from work pressures to health concerns to moments of fatigue or frustration. But they had learned to approach these challenges together, with patience and understanding rather than conflict or blame. Arguments became rare, and when they did occur, they were met with reflection, communication, and compromise. They realized that love was not about avoiding difficulty, but about navigating it together with grace and mutual respect. They celebrated small victories in their daily lives, completing a difficult project, reaching a personal goal, or simply sharing an uninterrupted evening of conversation became occasions for gratitude. Even mundane tasks, grocery shopping, laundry, cleaning, were transformed into moments of connection when shared and approached with a playful or caring attitude. They laughed at mistakes, supported each other's learning curves, and reveled in the quiet satisfaction of building a life together. The seasons continued to mark time in their lives, bringing new textures and moods. Spring brought flowers and long walks, summer brought warm evenings and spontaneous trips. Autumn brought golden leaves and cozy nights, and winter brought quiet reflection and shared warmth by fires or under blankets. They celebrated these cycles not as markers of passing time, but as reminders of life's continuous rhythm. Each season offering opportunities to grow closer and create memories together. They also embraced the small, everyday rituals that had become part of their connection. Morning coffees shared in silence, late-night conversations, soft music playing while cooking, or the gentle habit of checking in on each other throughout the day all became touchstones of their relationship. These repeated acts were not grand, but they carried immense emotional weight, reinforcing the sense of security and intimacy they had built together. Their bond deepened further through mutual reflection. They often revisited memories of their early days, the chance meeting in the rain, the first shared walks, the months of distance that had tested them. Instead of seeing the hardships with regret, they viewed them as essential elements of their story. The challenges had shown them the depth of their feelings, the resilience of their connection, and the importance of patience, empathy, and communication. Every memory, joyful or difficult, became a thread woven into the fabric of their enduring love in quieter moments. They also explored the emotional dimensions of their partnership. She learned to recognize the subtle ways he showed care, the brief touch on the shoulder, the way he remembered small preferences, the thoughtfulness in his actions. He, in turn, discovered the quiet strength in her empathy, the depth of her attentiveness, and the patience with which she navigated challenges. These insights did more than strengthen their love. They fostered profound respect and admiration for one another. Travel became a shared joy, though not always extravagant. Short trips to neighboring towns, visits to local landmarks, or even spontaneous drives out of the city became adventures that deepened their bond. They appreciated the novelty of seeing new places together, but found equal joy in noticing small, overlooked details: a bird landing on a fence, the subtle patterns of leaves, or the laughter of strangers around them. The world became richer because they experienced it side by side, noticing beauty in places most people might overlook.